Texas got off to a great start in the college football playoff. They took care of business against Clemson, and now they are looking to continue their run against Arizona State. We're going to take a look at how they beat Arizona State in this game, as well as the players that are going to help them in that endeavor. Texas obviously did a great job of running the football against Clemson, and that is something they're hoping to continue doing throughout this entire tournament. It's something that has been a question for them throughout the year, purely based off of the offseason. It seems like forever ago that CJ Baxter got hurt, and it's been a question of like how they're able to run the football. Now, the offensive line has done a really good job of stepping up and helping those running backs get in space and make explosive plays, and we saw what happens when that rushing attack becomes a factor. Texas is a very dangerous team, and we saw that against the Tigers. It's a 38-24 win, and it wasn't as much of it wasn't a blowout, but it wasn't as comfortable a win, I think, as some people wanted it to be. But at the same time, Texas did a lot of really exciting things that make you hopeful for the future and hopeful for this national championship run. Against Arizona State, they are right now a 14-point favorite. So that kind of speaks to maybe the talent gap of where these two teams are and what Texas can do to make things go in their favor even more. A 2-touchdown spread is definitely indicative of the talent gap between these two teams. But there are things that Texas still needs to do in order to win this game. It's not just going to be a walk in the park. Arizona State is playing with a ton of confidence. And that kind of leads us into the keys to the game for the Texas Longhorns in terms of what they need to do to make sure Arizona State does not have hope in this game. This is a game that should be in Texas' favor, and if they do the right things and these keys, you're going to find that the game is going to go in their favor early and often. The first one is going to be make Leavitt beat you. Sam Leavitt is a really fun player to watch for Arizona State. I think even Texas fans can appreciate some of the theatrics that we've seen from him, some of the electric plays that he's produced, and he's a young player who's only going to get better as time goes on. But if there's one player that you're going to want to beat you or want to make beat you, it's Sam Leavitt. And the reason is because everybody knows what Cam Scadaboo is going to do. You know what he's capable of doing. He's one of the best running backs in college football right now. And you know that Arizona State wants to run the ball. Sam Leavitt is a young player, like I said before. Young players typically need some time to get acclimated to the moment. And we saw that with SMU this past weekend. Kevin Jennings is a young player, and against Penn State, he struggled. So similar to that, in this game, Sam Leavitt is a young player. He is in one of the biggest moments of his entire career as a young player running the offense for Arizona State. We'll see if he's ready for that moment, because if Texas can get to him, and Texas defensive line had an absolute field day against Clemson, they were doing a really good job of getting to the quarterback, getting to Cade Klubnik, and they could do the same thing with Sam Leavitt and make sure that he's very uncomfortable and make sure that he is not a factor. The passing attack is not a factor in this game. The second one is going to be the run game must contribute. We saw last weekend what happens when Texas rushing attack is going. We've seen that time and time again throughout the season. We just haven't seen it on a consistent basis. So the run game has to be a contributing factor for this offense to succeed, because I think there maybe start to be some concerns about Quinn Ewers, partially just because of his health, his ankle. Is he fully healthy? I think that he has done a good job so far, but I think there are still some concerns that are starting to leak out from the Texas community of, is Quinn going to be the guy that we need to win a national championship? Now, not everything doesn't fall on his shoulders, but if they can't run the football, more pressure gets put on that passing attack, and I don't know if that's going to be a recipe for success to win a national championship. So you look what Jaden Blue did, averaged 10.4 yards per carry. Wisner had 7.3. Look at these two, and these guys are incredible running backs, and it speaks to the recruiting. It speaks to the depth that Steve Sarkisian has created at Texas, and that's something that's going to help them in this game quite a bit. Quintrevion Wisner is someone who we didn't expect to be a contributor because of the depth that Texas had, but this is why you bring that depth in. 2 injuries are going to make things a lot more difficult, and that's really where this has to come into play. These two have to have another good game, and they have to do that for the entire remainder of this tournament. Like I said, to be able to get to the national championship is one thing. to be able to win it requires you to have balance. And so far, Texas has done a good job through the first game. They're hoping to continue that against Arizona State. The other thing is pick up the pace. Arizona State can create explosive plays, but they cannot play at the pace that Texas is capable of playing. If they're able to get the pace to a faster tempo, then I feel like Texas has the advantage there. Arizona State isn't going to be more of your time consuming team. It's not like Army when you're watching that triple option. They're trying to take 10 minutes off the clock with one drive, but they're definitely a slower paced team than Texas is. So Texas is going to want to pick up the pace. That's going to put Sam Leavitt, the freshman quarterback, in a little bit of a bind because he might feel pressed to make plays, and that could put everything into Texas' favor. That's going to be a big key for me, is how fast, what the tempo looks like. And when you've seen Texas pick up the pace, you've looked really good. And obviously it goes with the other keys that we talked about too, the offensive line, the rushing attack, the defense doing its part. All of that stuff factors into what should be a really fun Texas team to watch if they're able to play at that level. Now, when you look at the players that we'll talk about here, there's a lot of players to talk about. We'll kind of focus in on some of the players that had big performances from this past weekend. Jaden Blue is who we'll start with. We talked about Jaden Blue and Quintrevion Wisner. Those are two guys that we expected big things from coming into this past weekend against Clemson, and they delivered. Wisner had 110 yards, 7.3 yards per carry, like you mentioned, 2 touchdowns. Jaden Blue, 14 carries for 146 yards and 2 touchdowns. They're explosive. Now, you take away some of the big plays, is what people usually talk about. If you take some of those big plays away, then what does that look like? This is still a very good rushing attack, even without those big plays, and that speaks to the consistency that Texas had this past weekend. Blue and Wisner are going to play big roles, like I said before. They need to play big roles because Texas has big aspirations for a national championship, and the rushing attack must be a factor if they are going to do that. That being said, a lot of it's also on Quinn Ewers. Maybe Arch Manning is going to continue to play a bigger role. That's going to be really fun. I think that gives teams a lot more to prepare for, because the more you force a team to prepare for, the harder it is for them to hone in on one or two players. And if you put Ewers and Manning in, that gives you two different offenses in a way that teams have to prepare for. So Arizona State's defense has to worry about who's the quarterback, who's the running back, who are the wide receivers. You have to learn so many different things that maybe a lot of offenses can't put on the field. The wide receiver is an interesting position for Texas. Matthew Golden had a pretty solid game. Even at tight end, Gunnar Helm is a really good player for them as well. I'm curious where Isaiah Bond stands in terms of his health. If he comes back and makes this offense even better, they already are a great offense, but they're also missing a player that can make things even more dangerous for the teams that they're facing. The defense is really fun to watch, and that's something we've talked about for a while now. Ethan Burke had a big game. I think we've kind of missed him for a little while. Haven't really talked about him for a little bit of time, but he stepped up in a big way. Colin Simmons had a big game. Jody Barron on the back end is someone who's going to play a big role here as well. We'll see what happens with Arizona State and some of their players that are out, but Jody Barron is someone who's going to line up against some of their best wide receivers and hopefully shut them down. Now, the players that you have to pay attention to for Arizona State, we talked about Cam Scatabo. Everything that he does is going to dictate how successful the offense is. Over 1,500 yards, 19 touchdowns. Arizona State wants to get him the football as much as possible. He's a physical runner. He's very tough to tackle, and Texas needs to be physical with him if they want to win this football game. We talked about Sam Leavitt before too, and you need to look at him as the X factor of this game. 2,600 yards, 24 touchdowns. He is someone that is going to play a big role for Arizona State, and he is someone that needs to step up. But the one thing that Texas can do is make sure that he is not a factor in this game. Make sure that he is uncomfortable and looks like a freshman playing in a big moment. That's going to be the biggest thing. Now, the biggest question for Arizona State, and Texas is probably going to prepare like he's going to play, is if Jordan Tyson can go. Now, he's said that he's potentially making a college football playoff comeback. I just don't know. The last time we saw him, he was in a sling. So I don't know if he's ready. I don't know if he's actually going to play. So a guy like Xavier Guillory is going to have to step up. They are going to need other players to step up and fill that void. And Texas is going to have to prepare like he's in the lineup, and then also just be ready if he's not. I think that Xavier Guillory is still a really good option, very quick player who can take the top off the defense. He maybe not be a Jordan Tyson, but he still has plenty of ability to make things difficult for Texas. Flipping to the defensive side of the ball, There's not a player I don't think that Texas is super worried about in terms of being more talented than what they have on their offense, but there are definitely players that they need to respect. Shamari Simmons is an absolute playmaker. He is a guy who flies all around the field, whether it's at the line of scrimmage, deep downfield. He is someone to worry about. Clayton Smith has stepped up in a big way. He's familiar with Texas from his time at Oklahoma, so he is someone that can be disruptive, and they need to basically dominate at the line of scrimmage. That's going to start with the offensive line, like we talked about before. Xavier Alford is another defensive back that is going to play a big role as well. Covering these receivers is not going to be easy when you face Texas, and Arizona State knows that. So Texas has to find ways to make these guys uncomfortable and figure out how to get their guys open. You feel pretty good with Steve Sarkisian calling the plays. You obviously know what you're going to get with that. So Texas has a clear path to this game. They have a clear path to the semifinals. It's just a matter of executing. They have everything that they need. They're playing really well, and if they get a guy or two back, or and they're able to find some more health in terms of getting guys healed up, then you feel pretty good about what Texas can do. But all I know is that if they continue doing what they did last weekend into the rest of these games, they're going to be pretty good and pretty set up for a national championship run.